Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Latino Vote Podcast. We have all in Washington, D.C. survived the Brown Prom. CHCI week is over, but don't be fooled. Hispanic Heritage Month is not over. There are still events going on from all across the city of D.C., and it's Hispanic Heritage Month every month here on the Latino Podcast. Not vodcast. It is a vodcast if we have video, too. Mike Madrid, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. I'm enjoying Hispanic Heritage Month, waking up every day, having my own little parade here around town in Sacramento. I've been on the road a lot, Chuck, a lot. And I think that there's been a lot of people asking about the book, a lot of colleges, universities, Latino students. Sorry. You okay there?
I was looking there. Something was in my eye.
I thought you were looking at me that way, and I was like, what did I do?
Sorry.
What did I do?
No, nothing. My bad.
Oh, yeah. Make sure you're not watching on YouTube, or if you are, skip over that, folks, because it's a little scary.
Because I was looking into the camera and I scared him. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. So I don't remember what I was talking about, but
you're in Sacramento. You were just talking about the smell.
Yeah. I will be in Washington, D.C. in the next couple of days, where Chuck and I are going to do a little event at Paraíso restaurant. I'll be at Politics and Prose doing a book signing. If anybody wants to be there, and I will be doing a panel at Georgetown Law on immigration, the new politics of immigration, and what the prospects are of getting immigration reform done in a new administration. Spoiler alert, I think the chances of getting something done good and positive are very, very, very high under Harris administration. I feel really good about it. We'll talk about that in another issue, another episode later. But Chuck, why don't you walk us through Brown Prom? Let us know how it went.
It went good. And to recap what Mike was saying, I don't care about all of his fancy Georgetown shit, but you better come to the live recording of the Latino Vote Podcast and the book signing at Paraíso, which is also known as Solidarity South HQ, which is the local Mexican restaurant, only 5 blocks from my house, actually about 8 blocks. So when I wander about as far as Paraíso because I'm old and I don't like to even put on pants anymore. So come down there. I promise to be wearing pants. Can't promise I'll wear a shirt, but it's at Paraíso. Look on the Twitter account. Look on our other accounts. We're going to be putting up a flyer that we've made. You can RSVP right now at Signs. That's not S-I like a sign, but Signs like Mexican last name, SAENZ, Signs at solidaritystrategies.com. Space is limited. Sign up now. Don't forget to sign up for the 2-for-1 offer, and we will have some books there to be signed. Yeah. The other thing, lots of signs. Signs everywhere. Anyway, a whole different thing.
Wow.
The Brown Prom was this week. And for those of you who were scoring on social media, I broke out the red blazer with the Solidarity Strategies logo embroidered on the back and went full Chicano out there with my red colors and all the things. We had a big time. It was good. It's like old home week. And yes, Mike Madrid, lots of people coming up. Love the podcast. Tell Mike hi. What's going on with you boys? Y'all are crazy. Why don't you ever put Mike in his place? You're so much better looking. And I just like, whatever. Now, y'all are all just kind of trolling me at this point. But the president spoke. I would be lying if I said that I stayed long enough to hear it. But I did watch it online when I got home.
Okay.
Because I got there at 5 o'clock when adults are supposed to be there. And I stayed for 3 hours, which I think at a gala and reception is enough time.
Yeah.
Because some of my younger cohorts and friends, one of which was staying in my basement because my house also turns into a hostel during CHCI week. And I got all these Latinos who are too cheap to pay for a hotel room, who stay on my couch and in my basement,
Sounds right.
all come wallering in about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning when I'm getting up to go to the gym. And I'm like, what have y'all been doing?
Wallering in. I didn't know that was a word.
Yeah. That's my word for you today. You always give me all your words. You come wallering in from a night out. You smell bad and your head hurts the next morning. That's how I will tell you about wallering in. But everybody had a great time.
That's fantastic. It is a good time for everybody to kind of come together, and all the people that you talk to on the phone or doing client work for, or see it on social media, kind of comes in, and it's community, man. It's great. I love it, and I'm glad you all had a good time.
It was good. It was good. And I think that everybody, as we talked about on the podcast, everybody got ginned up. Everybody had seen the VP a couple of days before. And all the corporate sponsors, unions, progressive, liberals, conservatives, everybody was there. Got to see our old friend who married me a few months ago, Tony Cardenas, who's always good to see Tony, and all the members. They all stood on stage. But anyway, the gala's a wrap. Until next year, we'll probably figure out how we can do a live recording of this podcast and be like the pregame. That's what would liven up the pre-reception at the CHCI.
Yeah.
Is if you had us just kind of having guests just waller into the show, if you know what I mean.
You're doing a lot of wallering today. I don't know what somebody put in your coffee this morning, but wallering, there's a lot.
There's been nothing but a nasty protein shake and a glass of water so far, but I may have some coffee in a little bit. Anyway, we should touch on some other developing news this week for all of our listeners who come to this station and the podcast to get your news of the week. The next topic I want to jump into is we have a debate. It's coming up next Tuesday. For all of you getting excited to think we're breaking some news about the vice president and Donald Trump, you're wrong. The vice president debates next Tuesday. Mike, what are you going to be looking for? And does it matter? And normally debates don't matter. That's why I'm so eager to hear your take on what you think could or could not happen next Tuesday.
Something very extraordinary has happened this year, guys, and that is that Mike Madrid has been wrong. It doesn't. I know. Let me tell you what I've been wrong about. I've been wrong by saying that, these debates don't matter. Well, I mean, clearly both of these debates did matter. They did have an impact, and it is an extraordinary campaign outside of the realm of anything that we have seen at any time in history. But bottom line is they did make an impact. I think this does matter. I think it'll matter a little bit. I think that the trajectory of the race is basically set. I think we're headed to a very, very close race. Could break either way at the last minute, of course. There's still a long time. And a debate like this could be one of those moments where something happens. Look, my surprise, breakout, quip, there's a word for you. Quip will be Tim Walz saying, I think he challenges J.D. Vance to a shooting competition. That's where I would go. Yeah, because Tim Walz is an ace shot. He's a crack shot. He's one of the best shooters in Congress. Regularly wins, competitions from other members of Congress because the guy's, he's a lifelong gun owner, and that's what you do in his parts of the country.
He was in the National Guard for 23 years.
I think
they shoot guns in there.
They do, and I'm sure the gun issue will come up. Kamala Harris brought it up, consciously, and she brought it up on Oprah later on. This is an important issue for them to connect with the working class white voter in the Rust Belt. That's why he was brought on, and I think that there may be some back and forth on gun ownership, and I think that Walz would be wise to challenge him to a shooting competition. I think it'd be fun. Let's have the vice presidents go out after the debate, have a little shooting competition, see who wins. I think Walz wins that, and I think it helps him a lot. Vance would, of course, never agree to it, but they ought to do that and put them on a little bit of defense too. So we'll see. I mean, what are you expecting from this debate?
I'd like to see him do an arm wrestling competition and run a 5K, but that's just me. But I think that you're probably
protein shake chugging competition.
I think that Walz is going to try to, you're saying it with the gun thing, but I think Walz is going to try to make him not be who he portrays himself as, which is like this all shucks, good old redneck from Appalachia, this whole hillbillyology stuff, and be like, in middle America, in Nebraska, where I was born on a farm, like working class people do this, and we don't disparage cats or single women who choose not to have children. So to your point, I think it may be the most impactful vice presidential debate since the time that an old Texas senator looked at Dan Quayle and said, who did he say he wasn't, Mike?
John Kennedy was a friend of mine. I knew John Kennedy, and you, sir, are no John Kennedy.
Oh, my God. See how great that was? Like, there hasn't been that. And that's like from Mike was like 22. So it's like 1962 or 1975, whatever that was.
1988. It was 1988.
1988. Good. 88. I had just graduated high school. I had a flowing, and I mean flowing, mullet down the middle of my back. Mullet. And I was nothing like Twisted Steel and Sex Appeal in 1988. But I digress. And I will say that.
We don't need that visual.
Come on now, this mullet and motorcycle riding. Anyway, this is going to be the most influential vice presidential debate since Dan Quayle. Maybe in that debate, he was trying to talk about how you spell potato as well. I don't remember, because unlike Mike Madrid, if you read his book, Mike Madrid would wait for the paper to come and he would read the news section of the paper to see what was going on with the Berlin Wall. And I was reading the comics and seeing how the Dallas Cowboys training camp was going. This is the difference in the way that we consume news in 1988. Hence why I don't know when the potato or the John Kennedy debate was. But I think this debate, because there's probably not going to be a presidential debate, so the news needs something to cover. You've got to feed the 24-hour news cycle. And to Mike Madrid's point, that's why this will matter. Will the debate itself matter? Nada. But will the coverage of the debate matter? Absolutely. Because if somebody says something funny, it'll get put on TikTok. Some smart young person will turn it into a meme. And then we'll be talking about it for days and days, because we're still talking about the vice presidential nominee for the Republicans, talking about childless cat ladies. Kamala Harris today, I would tell you to go look at the new ad she put on X today. I think it's probably a digital ad, but I saw it on Ad Impact, where the first 20 seconds of the ad, Mike, is Donald Trump saying, "They're eating our cats." And then there's a cat looking at the camera. "They're eating our dogs." And there's a pug dog with a big old bulging eyes looking at you. And then it says, "They're eating the pets." And there's a guinea pig on the ad. And then it pivots. It's a great ad. And pivots and goes to Kamala Harris. He goes, one candidate's talking about this and the other is talking about that. And then Kamala Harris is like, "We need a plan for housing. We need a plan to return manufacturing jobs, and we need to do something about rising costs today instead of worrying about whatever he's talking about." Like, it was really, really good kind of showing of an adult in the room. But I'll stop talking and turn the mic back over to Mike and get your last thought on VPs or that ad before we jump to the next topic.
I think you're exactly right. A lot of this has to do with the coverage and dominating the news cycle, because there does seem to be this large swath of quote unquote undecided voters. And I think a lot of us we're scratching our heads going, wait a second, we know this is not a normal range for undecided voters. We haven't had this large of an undecided voting block this late in the game since the 1980s, by the way, which is telling us something. Either voters are basically saying, "I'm voting for Trump and I don't want to admit it," or they are genuinely that low information, low propensity, and are disassociating Kamala Harris from Joe Biden that much. I'm not saying either are accurate or inaccurate, but it's likely one of those two, and the answer of which is most accurate is going to determine who the next president of the United States is going to be. So all of these things do matter. These debates do matter in terms of setting the vibe, if you will, of what this race is going to feel like. And you and I were talking before we jumped on air. I've been talking to reporters. You've been talking to reporters for the past 48 hours or so, talking about this, what they're calling a strategy to kind of ride this vibe, this Kamala vibe all the way into the White House. And can it be done? Now, most of that was being articulated in the context of her not doing debates. Oh, I'm sorry, sit-down interviews. But she is doing sit-down interviews. She's doing this Univision town hall. We're going to talk about in Nevada in just a second. She's sitting down with Stephanie Ruhle today. She is doing more and more of them, and I think she will continue to do more and more of them. But there is something about the fact that her positives have increased. This is not a typical trajectory for any candidate under almost any circumstances heading into the last 30 days of a race. But she is. Waltz is the most positively viewed of the four candidates. Vance is the most negatively viewed of the four candidates. That's a considerable advantage when your vice presidents are viewed that way, because the vibe that they set is far more important than the policy considerations that they bring to bear. The sense of the ticket, the sense of the people who are going to be leading the nation for the next 4 years are far more positive for Harris than they are for Trump Vance. Now, is that going to be determinative? Well, I don't know. No one knows. Hillary Clinton, in 2016 was viewed more positively than Trump, and I think we all know how that's turned out. Both incidentally had very high negatives. Kamala Harris is in positive territory. That's just a very, very interesting place to be. So again, without getting too squirrely and going down too many rabbit holes here, the way I'm looking at this race is trying to figure out and discern whether that high positive, those high positives for Kamala are in fact a function of undecideds. And as people do get to narrow in, do those numbers come down back into a normal trajectory, or can she keep vibing her way to higher levels of support, which she seems to be doing? With one other caveat, and I know I'm bouncing all over the place here, but it's that time of year. Most of the national polling has Trump actually increasing his vote share with some key constituencies. Latinos, of course, being one of those, and we'll talk about those at some point, but also with the white working class. Women, he's closing the gap with white women. Non-college educated white women are at 50% with him. And keep in mind, he overperformed with white women, non-college educated women in both 16 and 20. He overperformed the polling. There's no reason or suggestion that he wouldn't do the same now, despite the fact that we will probably have the largest gender gap in the history of American politics in November. So the data is kind of all over the place in a way that I have not seen. It's keeping me up at night. I'd say I'm losing my hair, but I don't have any hair to lose.
Oh, too late.
Yeah. So, I think I left that back in the Lloyd Benson, Dan Quayle debate in 1988.
Twisted Steel.
Twisted. That is just not a visual I want to see. I can just see you coming out to like a Scorpion song or something.
That's right.
Riding a motorcycle. Anyway, look, there's a lot of data. A lot of this will become clear as we get close, but this is going to be a close race. I think we've all said that. Vibes do matter. Can she ride it into the White House? That's what I think Harris is largely banking on. We're going to see if it works. It could work spectacularly, or it could be a cataclysmic, there's your word, cataclysmic, crash and burn. And, everyone will be pointing fingers and saying, how could they have been that stupid? Or they will be trying to take credit and saying, boy, wasn't I right about this whole damn thing?
I had wrote a memo for you and Andreas to say that we're going to limit our words to 3 syllables because after that, they are kind of made up words. So we're going to move on to the next topic. The next topic is for those of you who live under a rock or may not be following Twitter every day like me and Mike Madrid do. I also would recommend you follow Mike Madrid and watch him fight with people on the internet and talk about squirrels, which is always entertainment for me when I'm sitting on my couch in the evening watching the evening news, as I do starting at 6 o'clock because I am in bed by 8:30 and I have not had any coffee yet this morning. The next topic is Univision. Univision, I'm not going to talk about Spanish ad buying, even though it's at an all-time low for presidential elections. I'm going to talk about forums. Speaking about folks not talking to the press, well, Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris have both agreed to do a forum separately, not together, with Univision in Spanish, I assume, but that probably is going to be actually talked in English, and they'll do all the Spanish later. But it's something I think that's important. I think that it's good that they're going to be doing this. I think that it's good that they do this, where folks are paying attention. Mike Madrid and I have talked about how Latinos make up their mind late. And anytime I think you're getting more information to voters in Spanish or English in any other way is good. But doing this forum shows, again, the importance of doing outreach to Latinos, and especially when you do it on a station that, I don't know, Mike, I'm the one who buys ads, but I'll tell you that Univision nationwide controls about 60 or 70% of all of the airways across America. And Telemundo's number 2, but they really can't compete when it's, you talk about Univision in Miami and in LA and in New York. But what do you think about them both agreeing to do a forum on Univision?
I think it's great. I mean, I think it sends the right message. I think it's smart. I think for both camps, they've got to do something. I think Enrique Acevedo's hosting them both, right? Same reporter who came under fire for his interviewing Trump in the first place earlier this year. If many of you will recall, I know all Latino Vote podcast listeners will remember the discussions that we had about Enrique Acevedo. I think he's going to be hosting both, which is kind of awesome for him. So look, Nevada is always going to go Nevada too. And there's always that big question about Latino voters in Nevada because they'll carry the state if they end up coming home and the numbers look really bad 35, 40 days out, and then they look really good on election day. I think the same dynamic will happen. It's just kind of hitting this predictable range. So Univision having this event in Nevada on this topic, in this format, with this reporter, is perfect. Pitch perfect. I wish they were both in the same town hall meeting together. I think that would be interesting. But I do think that, that would be good stuff.
That
right?
would be so fucking good.
Yeah, that's what I would hope for. I wonder how that all was negotiated and came down. But bottom line is, it's going to happen. It's good. It's a good thing, and we're going to see a lot of. I think some good highlights coming out of that from both sides of this thing. And we'll see how much Enrique presses Trump after all the press that he got last time for just doing softballs. I'm sure the eating pet stuff will come up and the immigration stuff comes up, but we do have to remember, guys, and I'm going to be talking about this a lot on various platforms. I'm writing more long form on my Substack. If you're following me there on the immigration stuff specifically, this
on
is
the sub what? On the subs?
Yeah, new Substack. You don't know what that is?
Is a Substack like a sound like the Subway? Not with the Substack. Like they stack up the meat and vegetables on my subs.
Yeah, it's a triple decker foot long Subway.
That's a Substack.
Yeah,
but you're writing on yours. Anyway, you should go ahead. I didn't mean to. I just had never heard of it.
The shit you bring up, dude. You throw me for a loop. I can't even.
So you've been writing about immigration on the sandwich. Go ahead. My bad.
Writing on immigration on my sandwich, and the fact that Kamala Harris is running a campaign to the right of where George W. Bush was in 2000 is remarkable to me. It's just how the Overton window has moved, how just the center of debate, the fulcrum has just completely shifted on immigration in this country is just absolutely remarkable. And it is going to be wild to watch the different constituencies and different parties and different candidates going forward after this election cycle, regardless of who wins, deal with and tackle these issues because things have markedly changed.
I could not agree more. And I think if you said what's the single biggest thing that's changed in a congressional race this year, other than there's more spending trying to get Latinos to vote by Democrats and Republicans, but way more by Democrats, is the way that folks, Latinos and everybody else looks at immigration. There's been such negative campaigning by Fox News and right-wing media outlets demagoguing Latinos and immigrants for so long that it's starting to affect Latinos, moderate to conservative Latinos that are like, we came here through the normal process. And I'm like, MFer, your mama was an immigrant. And you're saying this.
I know a lot, by the way.
And I'm like, whoa. So, and I'm not saying that's a majority. I'm just saying it's a different amount of those people saying that.
Yeah.
And I think it is from what they hear. Like it's definitely like when all you hear on right-wing media and probably more so, Mike, on your social media chats about these immigrants taking your job or whatever. I don't think eating the dogs and cats shit, but I think that starts, you start shaving off more, just like Republicans shaved off some of the vote under Trump and others. I mean, it's just like you start seeing a changing of a demographic. All I'll say is this it's the biggest change that I've seen in my political on immigration.
Extraordinary. And I don't want to say I told you so, but I told you so. I told you all so. Mike Madrid is out there leading this charge.
I was wrong. Let me tell you when I was wrong.
The way you're going to fix your problems, Joe Biden. I wrote this in the New York Times in January saying you're going to have to pivot 180 degrees. You're going to have to turn on border security. You got to drop the immigration reform stuff to win this race. You can deal with the rest of it later, but you better drop it. And you know what? They dropped it. So I'm not saying the White House is listening to me, but I'm not saying they're not listening to me either, because this is Mike Madrid 101. They're listening to the Latino Vote podcast like everybody else in America is, and it makes absolute sense. And it was the right move. Is it going to be enough to get her there? I don't know. But what I will say is if she was not making this pivot, this race would not be close. Trump would be walking away with it. And I can tell you it's not just Mike Madrid's opinion. It's the opinion of the political team at the White House because they're putting her on the border in the next few days.
We're going to talk about that next. Stop getting ahead of my schedule. So before we talk about the border, I'll also say Mike Madrid might be right. I'm not giving Mike Madrid credit for this shit. Not one little bit. But what I will say that they're probably doing is Mike will say, well, I'm the one who give you this. Anyway, shut up and you listen to me for a minute. Is that I think they're listening to the voters in these states that are telling them the same thing I've been hearing in focus groups and the same thing I've been hearing in polling. Like it's a big difference out there. You can't ignore it. So guess what they're doing? They run smart political campaigns by saying, guess what, folks? We can be a nation of immigrants and a nation of laws all at the same time. I hate this whole part of this. If you're watching online right now, Mike Madrid is dancing in his chair and I just threw up in my mouth a little bit. Yeah. So here we go. We're going to now talk about something else that'll just make him beat his chest and rub his bald head, which is, guess where Kamala Harris is going next week? Just announced she's going to the border and not just to buy from a taco truck and wear a sombrero or listen to a mariachi band. She wants to go down there and talk about stopping fentanyl and being tough on the border, more so border security. And so take it away, Mike, but you've only got 2 minutes. Don't take us down some rabbit hole. I'm just saying
drugs and transnational gangs. It's like she's saying they're drug dealers and rapists and we need to build a border wall.
No, she's not saying that. She's just saying she's prosecuted transnational crimes
Kinda.
because she's been a prosecutor.
I don't know,
If they were
man.
trafficking drugs, money, or people, she said.
I'm saying if a Republican ran this ad, you would have all these Latino advocates that are behind her, lighting their hair on fire, marching up and down K Street and saying, this is racism and we got to eradicate it.
Including me, for all my friends who are listening and pay me, including me. I'd be out there with my signs. Look at my shirt today. I stand with immigrants.
And here's the irony. Here's that great irony is I take a backseat to nobody on fighting for refugees and immigrants. All of my children have been down to the border volunteering before they graduated from high school to work with, aid program. I don't need to justify myself. I take a backseat to absolutely nobody on this.
No, and you've done a good job as a Republican out there, and you can read about this in your book, and that kind of stuck with me. And I'll give Mike a hard time because he's my brother. But if you read Mike's book, Mike is like, this is a thing where Mike's been outspoken about what the immigrant story means to our culture, and that it's a part of our culture. It's baked in. It still don't mean you can't have a secure border, but we can honor immigrants and we can champion immigrants, much like Ronald Reagan, who was his hero, did in 1986. See, I read the damn thing.
Man, you got this like locked down, like better. You can write it better than I could. You must have read it a few times.
I'm a talker, not a writer, and I'm a lover, not a fighter. Well, no, I like to fight more than I like to love.
Anyway, you go ahead. Steel. What did you call it?
No, twisted steel and sex appeal.
That is going to be stuck in my brain for a week.
You can do it. It's all right. I'm a wordsmith. You finish your thought.
You're filibustering my 2 minutes because this is my moment to take my victory lap.
I'm doing it on purpose.
Ran off the clock. Yeah, you did. So Mike Madrid
we have to go. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Mike Madrid predicted this. Mike Madrid said, do this. Mike Madrid wrote a book about this. Mike Madrid said in the New York Times in January, do this. And you know what? They're doing it. And you know what? This is my victory dance. I have a wreath of olive leaves around my head. I am prancing around like Caesar coming back to Rome. You can hear the mariachi music in the background blaring as the parade is about to begin. I was right. I was right. I was right. And the Democratic Party will never be the same. It can't. It cannot go back to what it was. But here's the great irony. Even though the Democrats have essentially lost the battle on this, they are very well positioned to win the war, which is a great thing. Immigration reform can get done now that it's decoupled from border security. That has always been the problem, always. Nobody on the Republican side was going to step up and do anything on immigration reform as long as the border wasn't fixed, and the Democrats were never going to do anything on border security as long as the immigration stuff wasn't fixed. So you know what that means? 30 years of deadlock, 30 years of not getting anything done, and most heartbreakingly, 30 years of people suffering. So you know what, Democrats, for those of you that are listening to Mike Madrid going, I hate that SOB, good. You lost the battle, but you can still win the war, and we're going to have a big fight to protect the refugee, to protect our immigrant communities, and to get finally a sane process done for immigrants, and it's going to start when Kamala Harris is elected president of the United States. That's where we're at, and folks, that's where we've always been at. So check your ego at the door. There are people that are suffering that need our help. We've got a lot of work to do, and we will get started on January 21, 2025, where we will do a live broadcast from the Oval Office, the first podcasters.
They're never going to let you in.
Harris. I think Kamala Harris lets us in. I think she says, you know what, I want that podcast to do it.
So going back to reality here and talking about the issue itself, which is the border visit, not about how smart Mike Madrid is, which is what we like to talk about, look, I think that the visuals here, the messaging here in the final 30 days of the campaign is where she wants to end up, right? She wants to make sure that she's so passionate and so good on the Dobbs decision and on talking about choice. They have some amazing ads up this week. Again, there's a Latina, I tweeted about this, who's talking to the camera in English about how her husband is a Marine and how they have to move around from state to state. And if she moves to a state that doesn't allow IVF, she can't have this IVF treatment to try to become pregnant. That's smart. If Kamala Harris goes to the border and is like, look, we're securing the border, but we're also going to fix our broken immigration system and make sure that DACA kids can become citizens and all the good things that are out there, then I think that that's a good visual for her to be able to offset other folks. To Mike's point, there's a group of people looking for a reason not to vote for her, but they're also looking for a reason to vote for her. And I think that's why you see the polls being so close. At the end of the day, and this was my next topic to move to, which is the state of the race. Today, the state of the race, and I would ask everybody, and I said this last night on CNN, step away from the polls. Stop looking at every poll, because now you're going to be inundated with polls, and the polls are going to get stupid. That means there'll be one every day. There'll be a little difference. We'll talk about it on the news, and that's fine. I go on the news, and I don't mind talking about it. But this now gets down to the nitty-gritty. And this is what I really want to talk about next week when we talk in person in our in-person not debate, but our in-person podcast, because there's going to be a lot of friends in the room that we may literally pull up on stage with us to talk some about getting out the vote. Because there's two things that folks forget about. One is Democrats are better than Republicans at getting out our base support, especially in urban cities where we've done it for a long period of time. And we really didn't do it in 2020 because of COVID. That's on the good side for the Democrats. On the good side for the Republicans, in the last two presidential elections, there has been a plethora. For those of you who've ever watched the Three Amigos movie with Steve Martin, it's called a plethora. Look at this. They're on the horse. He's riding out and he's like, El Guapo. He's like, would you say that I have a plethora? Anyway, Google it, plethora and Three Amigos movie, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Anyway, I digress. Going back to what the Republicans have done well is in 16 and 20, Donald Trump has had a whole bunch of people show up to vote who have never voted before. And that don't mean that it's going to stop, but I would say if it happened in 16 and it happened in 20, it's going to happen again in 24. And it happened in 20 and we still won. So it can happen in 24 and it could still win. But our get out the vote operation of low performing, a lot of black and brown and young white people has to be better than it has ever been. And we can still win like we did in 20, but it's a different ballgame. There's no COVID. But this is what I'm saying is the state of the race today. For Democrats that are like, our ground game's better. It is. We have these great black and Latino voters. We do. But y'all are sleeping with your head in the sand if you don't think there's going to be a bunch of crazy white rednecks who don't show up to vote for Donald Trump, who've come of age in the last 4 years, then you're just sadly mistaken. Mike, what do you think about the closing arguments here? Not closing, but the closing of the race and the state of the race here 40 days out.
I think you articulated it perfectly. I think that's exactly right. There is one little caveat that I want people to be reminded of. The old turnout operations that Democrats used, especially in Latino communities, is not what it used to be. You're going to be turning out a lot more Republicans by using the operations that you used to use. When Chuck was younger and sexual steel or whatever it was that he was, riding his motorcycles. What is it?
Twisted steel and just sex appeal. Nobody was sexing anybody. I just was appealing because I was a Mexican Adonis with all that hair.
I just see a Texan with a mullet, and I just
nothing about
that.
Anyway,
nothing about that says appeal.
You gotta let it go.
I can't. It's like you branded it in my brain like a bad nightmare. It's just stuck. But having said that, like back in those days, you could just do massive operations and you're getting 75, 80% Democratic turnout. Now, maybe you're getting 60% Democratic turnout. You're turning out a lot of Trump Republican voters in these households. We're seeing it. It's everywhere. And it's not a majority. It's not. But you're looking at some of these polls, and if it's mid to high 30s, are you still getting that same performance metric out? Look, Republicans don't need to win the Latino vote, but if they keep increasing their vote share, and most of the public polling is showing Harris doing a couple points worse than Biden in 2020, how effective are those operations? There is that greater pie theory that I keep talking about. There are more Latino voters, and if you are winning them essentially 60-40, that math, those numbers do say good things. But you have to remember, it's not about raw numbers. It's about margins. You got to overperform with these constituencies. Maybe it's happening, maybe it's not. But what I'm saying is your GOTV operations can't just be a big casting call where you're going out shooting fish in a barrel anymore. Those days are gone. You have to be very specific, very scientific, and campaigns are now, by the way. It's not just to go knock on everybody's door on this block. You're skipping over those.
They'll have ID'd those Republicans and not talk to them. It's 101. You're right.
And that's what Chuck is talking about when he says they've got a more sophisticated ground game operation. It's not just that it's present. It's that it's been operating for months, doing those IDs, 2-3 door knocks, a phone call, making damn sure that the vote that you're going to turn out is the right vote, texting, all of it. There's a whole science to it. So that's what I'm saying is both parties are adjusting to this new reality. I do believe that turnout will be very robust. I think it's going to be more than people expect. And I do believe that a lot of that is going to benefit Donald Trump. I think this lower propensity voter does benefit Trump more than it has ever before with a Republican. But I also believe in the same way that 2020, we had the highest turnout in American history, the same issues, the same persona he has that brings low propensity voters to the polls is what turns off college educated Republican, especially women, and they flee. And that's why Trump lost 2020 by getting a higher turnout. Republicans, remember, picked up House seats in the highest turnout election in history. Those voters were comfortable voting Republican down ticket. But at the top of the ticket, those college-educated Republicans were saying, I've had enough of this. I'll vote for the Republicans down in Congress, but I ain't voting for the SOB again. I'm not doing it. And I think we could see that dynamic play out yet again.
I think you're right. And again, we want to remind everybody about the live taping of the podcast next Tuesday. And then we'll get it out next week ASAP. It's the same day. Also, Mike, on my phone here, because I know that you need to put a visual to what we've been talking about. This is Chuck Roach in 1989. Look at this hair.
Oh, my God. Is
That's
that a gun?
Buck knife.
What
That's
is
a buck
that?
knife.
A buck knife in your belt buckle.
In my belt buckle. And there was a dead deer above me at my buddy's house.
Has your new wife seen that?
I've never showed her this. I
Do
don't
not
think,
show her
wanna,
that.
Yeah,
Ebony, shut off the YouTube.
Ooh.
Yeah, listen only. If you're watching this on YouTube,
that is such good. All of that hair. This is. I forgot I had these old pictures on. Look at this. This is a picture of my papaw and my son back in the day. Look at that on the tractor.
Oh man,
yeah, awesome, right?
That is some white blood.
My mom's house.
White blood coursing through your veins.
Ooh, my boy does not have much on the skin melanation, whatever you would call. Oh, look at this one. We got to do a whole show on baby. This is when I was a young Mexican. Look at that one.
Look at those chompers too. Nice smile.
All righty, that's enough on the flashback Wednesday here. Don't forget again, Mike's coming to DC.
Yeah,
that means you got to come to Paraiso.
Come hang out with us. It's going to be great doing a live show. The room seriously is limited, and I think we're kind of almost at capacity, but I've been inviting people. I haven't even put out my invites yet, so I think we're going to have a lot of people there. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hang out with us. We'll sign some books. Chuck's going to bring some books. I'm going to bring some books. We're going to be doing a live podcast. And,
I'm bringing mullet pictures.
We're going to have his old pictures, his old yearbook photos hanging up. It's going to be great. He was going to be signing some of these 8x10s. What is it? Sexual appeal?
Don't tell her we showed any pictures.
Twisted Steel and sex appeal.
There we go. You can use it all day long. 245 pounds of Twisted Steel and sex. Anyway, thanks for listening to this week's podcast. Sorry, Mike Madrid took it into the gutter. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Don't forget to like us. Don't forget to follow us. Don't forget to give us a review. And if you're lucky enough to still have your mama with us, you better call her this week and tell her how much you appreciate her putting up with your shit and maybe letting you grow a mullet when you were 18. Chuck Roach and Mike Madrid. We'll see you next week.